Good afternoon, Dr. Sanders and classmates. Thank you for listening to my presentation highlighting my paper here. My paper is on Philo of Alexandria and whether or not he had an influence on the writers of the New Testament. We need to figure that out. As I did my research, there are similarities I found and there are great differences. There are similarities that had different meanings. So the reason this is important, because a couple of things in the background of Philo is that he was a Hellenistic Jew living in Alexandria, Egypt, a wealthy man, very well-connected man. He had spent his day writing. He was a big reader. He was definitely Jewish, big reader of the Septuagint. We're not sure if Philo knew Hebrew or not because he was so separated from Palestine at the time. And then, of course, we have the contemporaries of Jesus Christ, Paul, Peter, author of Hebrews, and John. So what we're going to look at very briefly is why, in some instances, there are scholars who think he did have an influence, and there are scholars who think absolutely not. Two of these on each end of the spectrum. One is C-Spec, who is a Frenchman and has a book out that is just recently being translated into French, and I'm unable to read that, and I want to. The other guy is Ronald Williamson, who says, no way. Spick says, yes, 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 and Williamson says, no, 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 no influence. And then, of course, we have everybody else on that line, that continuum, kind of like dispensationalism and covenant theology, somewhere in the middle. But let's look at that, and I'm going to really highlight this because I did this presentation before and it took me 23 minutes, and I'm going to keep it short. Philo and St. John. The big similarity in these two writers was their use of the word logos. Now keep in mind that Philo was very much influenced by Stoicism, very much influenced by Platonism. So the use of the term logos in Philo's writings did not have anything to do with Jesus Christ, because remember, he could not even fathom that because of the body being evil or bad, matter's bad, and the fact that Jesus had some very human qualities of compassion and care and love and a pain. And of course, if you're a Stoic, you kind of have to push those aside. So John definitely used logos as Jesus Christ, but Philo used it as some sort of metaphysical abstraction, and you can read about that. So logos, the same name, but different things, different meanings. Paul and Philo. I'm going to talk about two things. Number one is, the big one is self-mastery. Now remember, they both had a very good education, Philo especially, and we know that Paul was educated in one of the good schools in Jerusalem. So this self-mastery, again, has some Platonic implications of how you master your body. Plato, when he talked about Abraham, allegorized the land, the race, and the family that God told Abraham to take and move on, to leave and then move on. Plato used the land as the body, kindred as a sense perception, and the house of the Father as a speech sort of thing. So in other words, Abraham had to depart from his body and get his mind going right in order to receive God's salvation. That was his goal. Now we see this similar thing of self-mastery and this triad in Paul's. We're looking at Paul 3 through 11. I'm a spoke. We're looking at Philippians 3 through 11. We're looking at Paul's uses of three different things like a race, a tribe, a religious sect to define himself. But Paul also says you have to depart from the significance of this identity. He would suffer the loss of this and other things. And so that was a similar pattern of departure from aspects of self in a triad situation. So, were these similar? Yeah. Did that mean Paul got his information from Philo or was influenced? Not necessarily. It could have been from the school that he went to. Philo and the author of Hebrews, there's a lot to say about this one, but I don't want to bring up, you can read this, and there are 5 reasons that the writer of Hebrews and Philo shared a common heritage in Hellenistic Judaism because of these 5 things starting on page 8. The big one is, I think I don't want to do numbers. I don't want to do actually any of these because they're too complex. And you can just read them, even though we'll go to number 5 because I think that's interesting. Number 5 on page 11 says, the epistle to the Hebrews manifests the Platonic distinction between a shadowy and less perfect earthly temple and a perfect heavenly temple. Now, my, who does that sound like? Sounds like Plato and his theory of the caves, right? So, but this is kind of different, and this is found in On the Confusion of Tongues in Philo. So we see that Platonic aspect coming out in him. And I think we also see it in the author of Hebrews. That's why I kind of think it's Apollo who wrote that, because he had to be in school with Philo. They had to know one another. But anyway, we know that the purpose of Hebrews was to reveal or expose the inadequacies of the Alexandria belief about mediators. Now remember, there was a lot of things coming at these New Testament writers, and Christianity was a baby at that time. So it's real easy for people to come and the sophists to come and pull away and to go back to the comfort zone of the law and the priest and that sort of thing. So the New Testament writers had to work at saying, hey, don't do that because of this. So we see that in Hebrews a lot. And but when you really look at Hebrews and Philo, you're going to see both were excellent speaking Jews, speaking Greek. They were certainly educated in the study of rhetoric. That was very, very important. And we see that in their writings, both of them. So it's clear that they certainly breathed the same air, but we're not real sure that they were influenced. I just think what we have basically here is whoever the author of Hebrews was might have been Alexandrian Jew, but they converted to Christianity. So we had that new element of Christology on top of and explaining the differences between the old, the law, and Christ. Again, you'll see that on page 12. Don't want to go too much into Peter, but definitely Peter has some things that are interesting in 1 Peter. And the main topic on that was spiritual sacrifices and what that meant and how that is similar and different from Philo's. That goes on through page 14 and on through 15. Page 16, I simply took some verses from the writers, New Testament writers, and found similar verses in Philo's treatises that could lead someone to say, wow, boy, Paul was really influenced by Philo, or John, or the author of Hebrews. I don't think so, because that's just, to me, that's not a smoking gun. That's not definitive proof. That is not concrete, because anyone writing in that time could have done that if they were going to the same school. If somebody goes to school in New Jersey, studies math, I study it here, we can both come up with the same thing. I know that's a pretty simple analogy, but my point is they just lived at the same time in similar areas, similar backgrounds. They were Jewish in a Greek-speaking culture, and they were very educated. So that could lead to some of these being so similar. And again, you can read them on page 15, 16, and 17. Now, I do want to talk about the church fathers. The church fathers, of course, lived during the 2nd, 3rd century. And there is definitely proof that they were in contact with Philo's writings. As a matter of fact, it was the Christian Origen who saved Philo's writings from being destroyed in Alexandria. The first person to ever mention Philo was Clement of Alexandria, and of course that stands to reason there. But Origen took his treatises, he held on to them, he read them, and we see a lot of allegory from Origen and Augustine, or however you pronounce it, in their works that certainly they did get from Philo. So I find that very interesting. We have lost. There have been about 20 or 30 treatises that have been lost over time. I put in here that they were copied because they got old and crumbly and were copied. But the point is this, and I will conclude. That I do not believe, unless new evidence is uncovered, that the New Testament writers were influenced by Philo. I don't think there was the time. I don't think there was a direct motivation to do that. The similarities can be explained by culture, by language, by education, by influences of the times, by problems of the times, because they both launch a defense. Philo of the Jews, and Paul and the other writers of Christianity. But again, I do think that the church fathers were very much influenced by Philo, and that's almost proof is in the pudding there. So until we can uncover some more things, which I look forward to doing, and I do look forward to reading Spick's book on why he thinks definitely that there were some contact and communication and connection with the writers in Philo. I want to see why he thinks that. So I apologize I didn't have that book, but just suffice it to say that there are scholars on each end of the spectrum that think this and think that, and sometimes they'll come together and give a little bit and take a little bit, but there's just no smoking gun to me that we could say that definitely Philo influenced the writers. So with that, I thank you for listening to me. I am going to leave you now and try and save this, and that is 14 minutes and 21 seconds. Thank you.